evening and welcome. Following my visit to Hopewoodturning down in Essex a little while ago, I came back with a couple of items myself, one of which being a KS slow speed bench grinder. Now, the standard package which Simon offers is the bench grinder, a single CBN wheel and an aluminium oxide wheel. And I swapped out the aluminium oxide wheel for an 80 grit CBN, so I have two CBNs fitted. I then had a choice of two sharpening systems with regards to jigs, etc., and that was the Vicmark and the one-way. Well, I've had a one-way for many years prior to going to the Pro Edge, so I opted for the one-way system, and I've got a few little personal hints that might help you should you go down that route in setting up and making repeatability an easy operation. I'm not knocking the Pro Edge. I've had it for 3 years. The only problem I've had with it is lack of flexibility. There are a few features on there which I think could be altered without too much of an expense, but having said that, I'm not here to knock the Pro Edge. I'm just here to exploit the virtues of a CBN and the flexibility of a CBN setup. Okay, without further ado, let's get over to the grinder and get down to the nitty-gritty. So this is my setup. Here we have the KS DML 200N slow speed grinder, RPM 1450. Fitted standard would be the 180 grit CBN wheel and a 120 grit white aluminium oxide wheel, but I've opted to swap that out for an 80 grit CBN, which Simon will be able to do as well should you so wish. I've also got the Wolverine sharpening system, and I'll go into my setup and some tips on how to set that up accurately for really good repeatability. Over here we have the all-important Sharpie, which I use to mark the bevels to get the right angles and setup initially, which makes things a lot easier. And here's just a light which I've affixed to the back of the grinder from IKEA. I got this years ago. I've got a few of them actually, very handy things with a little switch on the back. But as I say, that is the sort of standard setup. The markings and what I've got I will go into, as I say, a little later on. Over here we've got the length sticks for the basket, and they ensure that the basket is always at the right distance from the wheel to achieve the grinds that I'm looking for. And also here is the fingernail jig, and I have maintained for the moment the Pro set from the Pro Edge, because the 50-degree mark there is just about 1.75 inches, just over, and that means that the protrusion of the tool from the jig is consistent each time I go to the grinder. And as I say, I will go into a little bit more detail in a second. And here is an aluminium oxide cleaning stick. Should you so wish, if you should happen to use mild steel on here, it could get clogged up, so a quick touch up with the aluminium oxide will clear out any metal debris that is in the wheel. When mounting the grinder onto your bench, there are several things to take into account to ensure it's set up accurately. The first is to make sure between 6.5 and 6.75 inches from the center of the spindle to the bottom of the base. Okay. The next important point is the front of the base, when affixed, must be in line with the leading edge of the wheel. And of course, the third and final point, the base must be square to the wheel, and that's on both wheels. Now, depending on your setup, various risers will be needed. I've put risers here and a couple of shims just to get it exact. A little bit of time and trouble in the beginning will pay massive dividends for the future. So, consistent repeatability relies on three factors. Number one, the distance the basket is protruding in relation to the wheel, the amount of protrusion of the gouge from the front of the jig, and the angle of the jig arm. Now I've found this to be on notch number 5. I've made a mark here and I never move that, and it gives me the grinds that I'm looking for. So the first thing to do is to make sure the basket is at the right distance, in this case for a 45-degree spindle gouge. Now I always lay it on that part of the bar up to the back here and then push forward, lock off, take that out, and then, as I've said before, make sure the protrusion is the same each time. I'm using a 1 3/4 inch protrusion, which I've already done, and then place in the basket, turn on your machine, and we're just doing a touch up here. So do one side, do the other side, and then roll just the weight of the tool, and there you can see we've got exactly the same grind that we had before, a nice edge on there and a facetless bevel, and the same will apply to the 30-degree spindle gouge, which I use for detail work. Again, just bring it up, and that then is ready for my 30-degree, and for my bowl gouges similarly 55-degree bowl gouge, which all mine are, barring my bottom feeder, which is 60. Place on that part, advance it forward, lock it off, and providing, as I say, you keep the leg in the same position as before, and indeed the protrusion to be the same, then you will have instant repeatability every single time. Now for skews and indeed scrapers, you use the platform. Now what I've done here, because I use mainly, I come back to the grinder for my skews, because I use a diamond card just to bring up the burr on my scrapers and come to the grinder quite infrequently for those. So this is set up for my skews, both my straight across grind, standard grind, and my radius skews, which I have 3, and I have the 1 standard grind. So again, you need consistency. So it's the distance of the table from the wheel. I have found to be this dimension, so I've put a hose clip here, so every time I put this in, it's going to be the same distance from the wheel. And similarly with the angle here, I've locked it off at this angle, and I use this purely for my skews. So if I want to just touch up here, I just turn the machine on, present the tool to the wheel, and the same on the other side, present the tool to the wheel, and swing round, and there we've got a single facet on both sides, and that will be the same each time. Now for the straight over skew, I'm still working on that at the time of making this video, so the facets aren't perfect, but I've got guidelines here. So I just keep that parallel to that line, okay, and just bring the tool up to the machine, no pressure, just let it touch the machine, and the same on the other side with this line, just touch the machine, keep it parallel to the line, touch it, and the leading edge, you can see, has got a great finish, a great facet-free edge. I've got this to go, but I'm not going to waste the steel, there's no need. And the same here. So that's how easy it is to get a consistent grind on your skews. And the final thing is your scrapers. Now with scrapers, I tend to use a diamond card, as I've said before, just to raise the burr. I was fortunate enough to find a table that I had with my previous setup. So this one is set up purely for my skews. I never change those angles. And I have this one here, which I don't know why I did that, cut that out, but anyway, this is some years ago now. So the important thing with a scraper, let's just take a square scraper for example, okay, and it's approximately, I don't know, 80 degrees, something like that. So again, what you need to do is to just check the angle. Bring him out of it. You can do that by eyeballs to begin with. Eyeballs. You can eyeball it to begin with. And this is only initial setup. And just see how it's going there. And this is where the Sharpie comes in. Just put the Sharpie across the face of your scraper and just run it across here and see what happens. And we're a bit, yeah, it's not too bad actually. We'll have a go at that. Well, these lines are just to give me a guide so that I'm going on square. So it there just needs to come down a bit. You can either turn off, just give it a bit of a whack. And there we're virtually there now. One more. And there it is. Job done. And that's the same for all scrapers. Now the thing is that I explained with scrapers, I normally would just raise the burr, because I don't use them that often, with something like 300. And all you do is onto the bevel on both up and bottom and just scrape it round. I mean, I have got some videos up on Sharpie with the diamond stone touching up, and you could do that for, I don't know, up to a dozen times I suppose, and then just go back to the grinder occasionally just to refresh the bevel. Well, that just about wraps up my overview of the KS Slow Speed Bench Grinder and Wolverine Sharpening Jig from Hopewoodturning. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can contact Simon directly via his website, or indeed you can leave a question in the comment section below and I'll do my very best to answer that question for you. In a nutshell, a little bit of time and effort in accurately setting up the system in the beginning will pay dividends in the long run. It's very quick to get repeatability once you've established the methods you're going to use, and it also gives you the added advantage of extreme flexibility should you want to explore different grinds and different methods of doing things. You can do it with a setup like this. It's not too restrictive. Well, thank you very much indeed for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you very soon. Cheers now.